Hi guys, this is Aaron Rump, and today we're going to be going over how to set up our machine to run our tools. Okay, so we've already made the program. We want to set up our tooling in order to get our machine ready to go. So first thing I want to do is I want to go look at our materials. So I've got the picture here to show our materials. We have our hardened gauge that we're going to be using to set our tools off of. I've got our material that we're going to be setting our work offsets with. I have a 5mm Allen wrench that we're going to be using to tighten the tool into the turret. I also have my calipers so I can measure the width on inserts, and I also have a spring-loaded T-handle, and I also have one of our 3 turning tools that we're going to be setting up into the machine. I have 2 already loaded in the turret at the moment. All right, so the first thing we want to look at is on our screen is we have pretty much what you'll walk into. I'm in the manual mode. And what I want to do is I want to get to my tools so I can start creating my new tools. So to do that, I'm going to come up here, I'm going to push the tool button. Okay, now this machine will take a second to think sometimes, so be patient. So on here is my tool magazine. I have 8 spots available. So I'm going to go to position 1. That's where I want to load my first turning tool, and I'm going to select new tool. Okay, so on here I want to make sure I select the correct direction of the tool. So for example, I'm going to select the wrong direction. So I'm going to hit select, I'm going to hit OK, and it's made my roughing tool. Now on the name, I can name it whatever I want to, okay? Just as long as whenever I create my program, like when we were making it, you are using this tool and it will do the rest for you, okay? So with that being said, I'm going to hit input, and it has created my tool. But if you'll notice, my cutting edge, this little red line, is on the wrong side of the insert. It's facing towards my tailstock and not towards the turret. This is an easy fix. So I'm going to arrow over, okay, using my blue arrows, and I'm going to go up here and I'm going to select the select button. I'm just going to push it. That'll bring up my insert screen again, and I'm going to cursor over to the correct insert, and I'm going to hit OK. All right, that fixed everything. Now my tool's facing the right direction, and my red line, the cutting edge, is on the right direction as well. So on my D, this is cutting edge number 1, it's the left side of it. Okay, on the H, because we're using conversational control, I will not be using an H number to set up this tool. Now my X and my Z, I'm not going to set up until I actually load the tool into the machine. So on the radius of it, you'll have to look at your insert. Okay, the insert that we're using has a number 1. Okay, so a CNMG 431, that last variable, represents a 15 thousandths radius. So I'm going to type in 15 thousandths, okay? And then I'm going to hit the yellow input button. That tells me that I have that in there, okay? Now with this arrow right here, if I hit select, I can move it over, okay? I can move it to where my red line goes up there. That's my cutting edge, but I don't want it to. The way it came up was the correct way, so I don't want to mess with that as well. Okay, my 95 has a slight angle coming over, so that way it does have the cutting edge. It's not square up against it. It does have a little bit of a tilt, so that'll be alone. We'll leave that alone. So on this one, I want you guys to pay attention. Okay, now this is called the insert angle. So on a C-type insert, the angle is 80 degrees. Now keep a look on this visual right here. If I was using a D-shape insert, that is a 55-degree insert. When I push input, watch this, it changes. So that is kind of a visualization of what the angle looks like on your insert. Okay, and obviously a V-shaped insert would be a 35 degrees. It makes it very skinny. All right, so this would be for a very good finishing. A D would be for a semi-finishing, and then obviously our roughing tool is 80 degrees. It is a C, letter C shape insert. All right, my insert length, we're going to leave it there. Okay, you don't want it to be too long or else it can attempt to make very deep cuts. So on my spindle rotation, this doesn't make very much sense looking at it. If you want to understand it better, walk to the back of the spindle and look through the spindle, okay, or pretend you're looking through the spindle, and that is the direction, okay, clockwise, that the turret is going to be turning when it's cutting. Because you got to remember, you want the material to come on top of your tool when it's cutting, not underneath the tool, because that's not where the cutting edge is. All right, so we're also going to go over here, and I have two types of spindle coolant. So I'm going to turn on my number 1, okay? One's going to be for the actual turret, and one's going to be for the hose. I believe number 2 is for our black hose that's on top of the turret. So that's all said and done. So now what we have to do is we have to actually set the X and the Z. So in order to do that, we have to load the tool into the turret. So to do that, I'm going to go back to manual, MAN. I'm going to push the button, and it'll take a second. It'll come back to my screen. So here's what I want to do. I want to load a tool in there, okay? So I can come down here and I can find it. Now, keep in mind the select tool button was up here, but when I came to this page, it wasn't there. So I'm going to hit my arrow over, and I'm going to select the tool. This is the easiest way to do it, instead of coming down here and typing all that out. Instead of typing out roughing underscore tool, we're just going to go to select tool. Tool's already selected. I'll hit OK, and then it will immediately type in everything right there. Okay, at this point in time, our door is open. We need to close the door and press cycle start. That will move, okay, it's going to orientate our turret to where pot number 1 or turret location number 1 is where it needs to be to load tool number 1. So let's close our door. Remember, we're not slamming it, we're just shutting it closed. I'm going to hit cycle start. Okay, so now turret 1 position is in the ready position. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my tool. Remember, this is a C shape, okay? It's 80 degrees on the angle, and I'm going to load this into my machine, all right? So, when I'm loading this into my machine, if you'll notice, I'm loading it this direction. If you load it upside down, it's not going to cut correctly, all right? Because I want my spindle to come on top of it, okay? I want my material to cut over the top of it. So I'm going to orientate it just like this. Now, using my number 5 Allen wrench, I'm going to use that to wedge. I have a couple screws right here that actually push the wedge into the turret, therefore forcing the tool into location. This will make sense when you see it. Okay, so I'm going to put my tool in there correctly, and then I'm going to push it all the way back. Okay, now one thing we want to be very careful on, okay, is this machine down here where the turret and the tools are at, okay, on the bed, there's a very small gap, okay? Now, I don't want my tools to be sticking out more than 2 inches, 375 thousandths. That's 2 inches and 3/8. I don't want it to be sticking out too far, okay? So, with that said, I'm going to slide it back until it stops, keeping pressure against the turret. I'm going to tighten these screws down one at a time. And then once they're really close, I will come back in here and I will tighten them both individually as well. And remember, this doesn't have to be super tight, okay? I'm using my thumb. Then I go back and I verify this nice and tight. All right, so that's done. So now what I want to do is I want to actually set the tool. So to do that, I'm going to need my gauge that I'm setting the tools off of. So what I'm looking for when I'm setting this is my gauge that I'm going to be using, okay? This is a heat treated ground shaft, okay, for my gauge. And this right here is where I'm going to be setting my Z off of, and this outside diameter is where I'm going to be setting my X off of, okay? Now when I put it in my chuck, I'm going to put it all the way against the face of my jaws, and I'm going to grip on this flat area right here, all right? So to show you a little bit better, what I'll do is I'll take it, I'm going to slide it in there all the way flush, okay? Make sure there's no chips in the way, no debris. Then we'll put that on there. And using my spring-loaded T-handle, okay, do not use a regular T-handle, I'm going to tighten that in there, okay? Now when I say tight, just make sure you get it tightened in there. You don't want to put a whole bunch of weight on it because we're not spinning it, okay? So it doesn't require that much. So I got my tool in here, I've got my part chucked up. So what we're going to do now is we're going to come over and we're going to set our Z first. So down here at the very bottom on your controller, we have a lever, okay, little switch for fine and coarse, okay? So I want everyone to stay in the fine, so I'm going to click it up, and then I've got my toggle, okay, I got my axis jog. I'm going to jog towards my part. Do not jog in the coarse. Okay, that's too fast. So I'm going to jog in my fine until I get close, and then I'm going to come up. Okay, once I'm about an inch away from it, I'm going to start using my hand wheels, okay, for my x-axis and then for my z-axis as well. So one thing I want to do is once I start getting real close, if you'll look right here at the Z, every click I do, okay, is 10 thousandths. If I want to reduce that, I come over here to my feed, okay, so now whenever I do it, it's going a little bit less every time. So now it's going 5 tenths. Okay, so that's pretty good. So let's make it up to where it's 1 thousandths at a time. Okay, almost. Looks like at 100% we were good. Let's double check it. Yep, so at 100% it is 1 thousandths. That's where we want to be. All right, so with that being said, I'm going to start handling towards my spindle. But what I also need is I need something on here to gauge where that's at. So what we'll be using is we'll use a piece of paper for right now, unless we have an actual feeler gauge. And what we'll do is we'll come down here in between the face of the part, okay, my gauge and my tool, and I'm going to wiggle back and forth. Make sure that you are in front of it, okay? So I'm going to start coming in Z, okay? And as I come in, one click at a time, I'm moving my paper back and forth until it does touch and my paper stops, okay? So my paper has stopped. That means that's right where I'm at. So what I'm going to do from here is I'm going to come back to my tool, push tool, and then I'm going to come over until I can start setting it. So we're going to get a tool measure, okay? And this tells me where I'm going to be at. So when I hit tool measure, it's going to take me to this new screen. So I'm setting the Z. So if you look here, you can see the animation is telling me Z0 is right there. So if I want to get real accurate, I can put the thickness of my paper, okay? I'm not going to do that for right now because it's only a couple thousandths, okay? So it's my roughing tool, it's my Z, this is this easy, set length. If you'll notice, now my machine knows that tool 1, when it's at the face of that material, is 0, all right? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here and I'm going to do the same thing with X. So to do this, I'm going to switch into X, I'm going to come over and I'm going to touch the outside diameter of that gauge the same way as I did my Z. So I'm going to back off a little bit, okay, and then I'm going to start backing it up. So it'll be kind of hard to see from the machine standpoint because I'm on the other side of it. So what I'm doing is I'm coming close, and then I'm going to start coming in on the part itself. Okay, once I'm close to it, I'll stick my paper back in there and I'm going to go back and forth until it actually touches the paper and stops moving. Okay, so I have stopped the paper and stopped moving. So that's where I want to be at. So what I would do right now is I would actually measure the outside diameter of that gauge. Now I did that before we started, and that value is 3 inches 495 thousandths. This is where you put the diameter of your gauge. Now it's important that you use the same gauge every time or it will not work properly. All right, so what I'm going to do is from right here I'm going to go to set length again. I have that in there, so when I hit set length, you'll notice that the position of my tool tip is 3 inches 495 thousandths away from center. All right, so that tool is already set. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and get out of there, get my paper, I'm going to handle away from it, okay? So make sure we handle away from our part, and I want to come pretty far away from my material so that way when I orientate to my next tool, I'm not going to run into it. All right, so I'm pretty far away from it now. I feel comfortable. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and we're going to go back to tool, okay, we're going to come back down and we're going to create a new tool. Now, my tool right now for my grooving is in location number 6. So I'm going to come down to location number 6 and I'm going to select new tool. All right. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be using a grooving tool. So if I come down here, a grooving tool, what I call a grooving tool, is called a plunge cutter. All right. So keep in mind the direction of this right here. There's a whole bunch of directions, okay? But what we're going to be using is the main one right here, okay? Where my tip direction is right there. I'll hit OK. Plunge cutter. I'll hit input, the yellow input over here. Okay, same thing. We're not going to be using an H because we're using conversational control. I'm not going to use those yet because I got to load it in there, theoretically load it in there. Okay, the radius. Now on this right here, I want to put a very slight radius on there because it will help whenever I go to program the part for it to not alarm out. So I'm going to put 1/10 radius on the tip of that right there. That way it helps with the machine's logic. So also what I want to put on here is I'm going to go over to my width, the insert width. Now make sure when you guys are using this, if you stay cursed over something long enough, it will tell you what you need to do. So at this point in time, I'm going to measure the width of my insert. The width of my insert is 120 thousandths. Okay, it's very critical that you put that in right, because if you don't, the part will come out of tolerance because the machine is programming based on that. So 120 thousandths. Okay, we'll come over and see if there's anything else we need to set. We'll set this to 0.4 as well. Okay, spindle direction looks good, and let's go ahead and turn on that coolant. All right, so with that being said, I'm going to come over here, and that's already done. So here's the good news, that tool is pretty easy to set. So let's go to our manual mode. Okay, I'm going to go up here to select tool, and then I got my plunge cutter. I'm going to hit OK, and then my plunge cutter should have gone into my manual. So let's go back. So if I'm done, let's hit back one time. There we go. So we'll hit back and then we'll be on the correct screen. So let's hit select tool. Then I'll hit OK. There we go, much better. This is the tool I want. Okay, the door is open. Let's close it and select cycle start. Cycle start. Remember, it'll take a second, so don't push cycle start twice. So you can see that's my grooving tool that I'm going to be using. So all I want to do is I want to do the same thing I did with the turning tool. I want to move it up there and touch it in Z, and then I'll touch it in X as well. Okay, so let's go back to tool, highlight the correct tool, and tool measure. Let's get into our measuring mode. Okay, so I'm going to be doing my Z first. I'm going to go ahead and come up to my tool, or come up to my gauge. And remember guys, it's okay to be slow. We want to make sure we do this right. And once we do it right, then we'll do it fast. Okay, so I'm pretty close. So I'm going to start coming towards it. So once I feel like I'm pretty close, I'll go ahead and grab my paper, and I'll start going back and forth in between the face of the gauge and my insert. Okay. Okay, so my paper has stopped. I know I'm good. Same thing. I'm going to hit set length. That should take that to 0. And then I'll come back over and I'll do the same thing for our X. Once I have that set, I'll be able to go to the next tool. Okay, so let's come all the way back. Again, it is kind of hard to see with the camera angle. So I'm coming up to it. Once I'm close, I'll stick my paper in there and wiggle it back and forth. Okay, I have stopped. So at this point in time, I'm going to switch to my X again. There we go. And remember, it remembered our diameter of the part. So all we have to do is set length. So now the same thing, it knows what that's supposed to be. All right, we're almost done. So I'm going to move away from it. That's what coarse looks like. We want to make sure we don't use coarse because it's just a little too fast for you guys. All right, so the next thing I want to do is I want to hit back. Okay, good habit. Let's hit back. Let's get out of that mode. Let's go back to our tool. Now we want to set our threading tool. Now our threading tool is in location number 3. All right, so I want to go up to location number 3. And remember, if it's not loaded in the carousel, you can pick whatever turret position you want, as long as it's a position you can load the tool into. Okay, so new tool. Okay, we're going to go down to our threading tool. Now it's going to look a little bit different. Okay, so we have our threading tool. We're going to move over. Okay, let's see, let's double check it real quick. And we have a cutting edge position. Okay, so I'm going to hit OK. So I've got my threading tool in there. I'm going to hit input. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll come over. Don't use the H. We haven't set that yet. We got our tool radius. I'll usually put that very slight so that it has something to look at. So I'm going to move over. And right here, let's see what this does right here if I go 80. Nope, won't let me do nothing. So I got my threading insert. Okay, it kind of looks like a different style, but it is the style we're going to be using. Okay. And this is pretty easy because all I'm going to do is just tell it a length. Sorry for going back so fast. Our insert length, 0.4. We got our spindle direction. And then I have my coolant that I'm going to select. All right. So with that all said and done, I'm going to be able to come up to here and I can load that tool into its location, which I said it's already preloaded. And we'll set the X and the Z. So we'll come back into manual. Okay, tool name, I'm going to hit select tool. I do want the threading tool, hit OK. And then what I'll do is I'll come up here and I have to make sure that my door is closed. And then I'll hit cycle start. All right, so my threading tool is in location. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to come back up. Okay. Now that I'm close to it, I'm going to go into my hand wheels. Looks pretty close. Take our piece of paper, move towards it. Once I'm pretty close, I'll stick my paper in there and I'll go back and forth. Grabs my paper. I'll come back over here to my tool. We want to measure tool, threading tool, so tool measure. Okay, we're going to be doing our Z. And I'm going to hit set length. Good, that's all said and done. So what I'll do is I'll come off of it a little bit in Z. Come out. Real easy, guys, to do this after you know after you've set the first one. You're just setting every tool the same way. Okay, so I'm going to come back and forth until it's on there. Okay, my paper's still moving. Almost. There it is. It is done moving. All right. So with that being said, I'm going to move into my X. That diameter is already set. So we're going to push set length. You should see the same thing every time. You should see that value come up. Okay. So with that being said, I've got this all set. So now what I want to do is I want to set my work offset. Set work offset. So what I'm going to do is I can call up any of my tools that I have set off the face of the part. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call up tool number 1, and then I want to use that tool to do it. So let's hit back. Tool name, I want to select a tool. Let's come up to my roughing tool, hit OK. We'll close my door. Remember, we're not slamming the door, we're closing it, and hit cycle start. So now that our door is open, what we'll do is we'll use our spring-loaded T-handle. We'll remove our part. And we're going to load our material that we're going to be cutting. All right, so I have to load this up, open this up a little bit. So I'm we got that all loaded in there. Now the good news is we don't even have to turn this on to be able to make a cut on it, okay? But it's always a good habit to do it. So what we'll do is we'll turn this on if we can, and then we'll make us a little cut on it. So first thing I want to do is I want to get close. Okay, I'm going to come up close to it, and we're going to go ahead and turn this on about 500 RPMs. So we'll go up to MDI, type in S500 M3 end of block insert. Okay, this is where we'll hit cycle start. Okay, so that's not very fast, but it's fast enough for what we want. So now I'm going to start handling towards my material. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make a real small pass on it, okay? Just enough so I know where I'm at. Let's see how this works. Okay, so I'm pretty close to it. And so what we can do is we can actually set our length from right there. That just helps us get pretty close, okay? So what we'll do is we'll move a little bit closer. All right, that'll be close enough. All right, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna hit reset to stop our spindle. So we know that's where we want our Z to be set. It's pretty close. So what I'll do is I'll go to set work offset. So notice how it went to this right here, and it's telling me what I want to set. So I want to set my Z work offset. So when I hit Z0, okay, it knows that that is where the location is. Now my tools have not changed in the location, but my position for my work offset is right there, okay? So my work offset's still there. If I go to my tools, you'll see that that tool is still set right there. So that's telling me when I go to my work offset, let's go back up here, work offset. Okay, it's telling me, well, let's go back to where we were. It's telling me that work offset is so far in front of where we set our tools, all right? So with that being said, this is how you set up your machine. Thank you for watching.